There was a version of you that they were counting on. A version that would fight for the seat at the table they kept pulling out from under you, that would make the calls, draft the messages, apologize for things you didn't do, and negotiate your way back into spaces that should never have required negotiation to begin with. They had a script, they knew their lines, and they were waiting for you to deliver yours. And then, you chose a different version of yourself, and nothing has been the same since. When you chose not to beg, you didn't just refuse a specific act, you refused an entire dynamic. You refused the structure of a relationship that required your desperation as its operating fuel. And in doing that, in the quiet, unglamorous act of simply not sending the message, not making the call, not showing up where you were not wanted, you said more than any argument, any explanation, any confrontation ever could have said. Your disappearance was not passive. It was the most active statement you could have made about your own value. And they heard it, even if they never said so. Let me describe the dynamic in full, because I want you to understand exactly what was happening in the structure of that relationship. There was an implied agreement, and it went something like this. You were permitted to be in this space, this relationship, this circle, this job, this family dynamic, as long as you maintained a specific posture, the posture of someone who was aware that their presence was contingent, who understood that the invitation could be revoked, who expressed through their behavior a sufficient level of need for the connection to make the other person feel powerful in the holding of it. This is not always conscious. Sometimes the people who construct these dynamics are not sitting in a room somewhere deliberately designing a system of control. Often they do it through habit, through their own unhealed attachment wounds, through a survival strategy that learned a long time ago that the way to keep people is to make them need you more than you need them. But regardless of the intent, the effect on you was the same. You were in a relationship that required you to perform your own diminishment in order to maintain access. And you got tired of the performance. Not all at once, not in a dramatic moment of clarity. Slowly, through the accumulation of small humiliations, through the pattern finally becoming undeniable, through the cost finally exceeding what the connection was worth. And one day, you just stopped. Here is the spiritual anatomy of what you walked out of. The dynamic you were in is what happens when a relationship is built on an imbalance of perceived need. The person with the perceived upper hand, the one who appears to need the connection less, holds the structural power. And the system reinforces itself. The more you pursue, the more they withdraw. The more you withdraw, the more destabilized you become. The more destabilized you become, the more you pursue. It's a closed loop. The only way to break a closed loop is to remove one of its elements. When you stopped pursuing, you removed the element that powered the loop, and the loop had no capacity to sustain itself without your energy running through it. From the outside, this might have looked like indifference, like you had simply given up or moved on. But something in them, the part that knew, on whatever level, what was actually happening, felt the removal of the supply. And the response to that removal is rarely graceful. People who are accustomed to someone's pursuit do not receive the cessation of that pursuit with peace. They escalate. They reach out, then withdraw to test if you'll pursue. They manufacture reasons to re-engage. They tell mutual parties things designed to get back to you and prompt a response. They do the thing they refused to do when you were available. They try to maintain the connection. But by then, you had already moved. And I want to say something about the grief that comes with this kind of decision, because it is real and it is often invisible. You didn't just lose a person. You lost the version of the future that included that person. The relationship you thought it could become if you just loved enough, tried hard enough, changed enough. The version of yourself that was going to finally feel worthy of being chosen freely. The grief of walking away from a one-sided relationship is complicated because society does not always recognize it as grief. There is no language for losing something that never was fully what you hoped it was. no ritual for mourning a future that only ever existed in your own investment. But the loss is real. The attachment was real. The hope was real. And the decision to honor yourself over the hope did not cancel the grief. It just added the grief of your own loss to the grief of the relationship's failure. Some of you are still in that grief, honoring the decision and still mourning what you wished it could have been. Those two things can coexist. You do not have to be completely over something to have made the right choice about it.
The speaker never sounds like a preacher delivering a sermon or a coach motivating a client. They sound like someone who has been there, who is sitting across from you, not standing above you. The authority comes from having survived something, not from having a title. Here is what your disappearance actually communicated to them, to yourself, and to the watching spiritual realm. To them, that you had located a value in yourself that was not contingent on their recognition, that your peace was a currency you were no longer spending for access to their company, that the leverage they had over you was the leverage you had given them, and you had simply stopped giving. To yourself, that you were capable of surviving the withdrawal, that the fear of the absence was worse than the absence itself, that the version of you that existed on the other side of the not begging was more solid, more real, more you than the version that had been performing for their comfort. To the spiritual realm, that you were no longer in agreement with the covenant that had been constructed between you and this dynamic, that you were dissolving your end of the arrangement, that the access points you had opened through your pursuit were being closed. This is spiritually significant in ways that go beyond the relational. When you remove yourself from a dynamic that was draining your anointing, you don't just feel better emotionally, your spiritual capacity increases. The things that felt blocked start to move. The prayers that felt like they were hitting the ceiling start to break through. The discernment that had been dull starts to sharpen. Your absence was not just personal wisdom, it was spiritual warfare, and it worked. Have you ever walked away from something when the expectation, spoken or unspoken, was that you would stay and fight for it? Not because the thing wasn't worth loving, but because your peace was worth more than the price they were charging for it. Comment "walked away" below and tell me what happened to you after. Not to them, to you. I want to hear what became available in your life when you stopped spending yourself maintaining something that was designed to require everything you had. Your story is someone else's permission. Someone reading your comment right now is standing at the edge of the same decision. Let them know what is on the other side. Comment "walked away," subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.